It's Thursday, the 26th of March. Good morning. Well, let's start with the good news, shall we? The weather has been lovely, and for those of you who've got gardens or parks near to you, make the most of the next couple of days, because next week it's going to be cold and not as pleasant. Somehow, I think the sunshine has made this bearable for lots and lots of people, particularly those with young children. And the other really good piece of news, and it's just amazing, fantastic, and it says so much about so many of the people that live in our country. The call to arms, the call for volunteers to come and help the National Health Service in a variety of ways, has led to a stunning 500,000 people volunteering their services. I don't think since Kitchener in 1914 have we had a national response to a call anything like that measure and number. It's absolutely fantastic and says some really, really good things about so many people living in our country. It's amazing. But there are some worries that persist throughout this crisis, and in particular, I want to talk a little bit this morning about leadership and also about social order. You know, remember those riots that happened in London just a few years ago? Social order is very, very important. On leadership, our Health Secretary, Matthew Hancock, yesterday said very clearly that there are 12,000 ventilators available to the National Health Service for patients that go and need critical care. And of course, one of the worries with this COVID-19 situation is that so many people in countries like Italy have needed ventilation, including, of course, a lot of young people too. 12,000, he told us, the NHS has, up from 5,000 when the crisis began. And yet, Sir Simon Stephen, the boss of the National Health Service, tells us that actually that's not true. It's actually 8,000 that are serviceable. And whilst, it's great that 10,000 more ventilators have been ordered from Sir James Dyson, and we know how good he is at manufacturing things. You know, when Government Minister Nadhim Zahawi went on to do interviews last night, it was yet another complete media car crash coming from the government. And I would say this to Matthew Hancock: please just tell us the truth. Even if that truth is unpalatable, just tell us exactly where we are. Now, of course, it does raise questions as to why we were not ordering these a couple of weeks earlier. You know, we'd seen what had happened in Italy. And of course, the really rather frightening thing is that our trajectory, our path, is mirroring what happened in Italy. I hope to goodness that we don't get there in a couple of weeks' time. I hope to goodness that those pictures you've seen of the Excel Centre in East London being prepared for 4,000 new hospital beds, plus also a couple of morgues being prepared there. I hope to goodness we don't get to where Italy is, but the government absolutely has to level with us. And the same goes for equipment and medical testing of National Health Service staff. And, you know, we've all read, we've all seen people telling us that they feel working on the front line. A lot of them have used phrases like, we're lambs to the slaughter. Boris Johnson stood up in the House of Commons yesterday and said, everything's absolutely fine. The army are now involved, which indeed they are, and that's a good thing. And they're delivering huge numbers of face masks and protective equipment around the country. Well, whilst it's true that that process may have started, the impression the Prime Minister gave is that there is not a problem with this. And I myself spoke to somebody working at an Essex hospital yesterday who said, you know, there simply are not tests being done even for National Health Service staff, and that in terms of protective equipment, many of them are genuinely living in fear. So Boris, I know one of the jobs of a leader is to calm us, tell us that you're in control, but please just tell us the truth. Tell us that in a week's time, the equipment will be there. Don't pretend that everything is absolutely fine now. Now, we do hear that 3.5 million test kits are on their way, and that's to be welcomed. These are little thumbprick test kits that will tell us whether somebody has had coronavirus and is now immune to it, and that's enormously useful because that'll mean a lot of people who can go back to work, etc. What it doesn't do is to deal with the real problem that we've got at the moment, is we haven't got a clue, not a clue, how many people in this country have got this. We know, of course, that Prince Charles now has got it because he was able to go and get tested. But the only way of getting tested in this country is if you go into hospital when you're really pretty unwell. It must be hundreds of thousands of people who are positive for coronavirus. And we still seem to be aiming at about 6,500 to 8,000 tests per day. That in a country of 66 million people, during which we're living through a national emergency, to quote Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister. And when you contrast that to South Korea, whose initial outbreak was actually bigger than ours, and the South Koreans, by rigorous testing, and where they found someone that was positive, immediate, very strict quarantining, and then cleverly, and they were using mobile phone records as much as anything else, but they were able to trace the people that the coronavirus positive person had met, had spent time with, so that they could immediately be placed in quarantine too. And South Korea have done just an amazing job. They've more than flattened the curve. It's almost now flatlining in terms of new infections. Now, look, of course, we all know there's a risk that when this is seen to be all over and we all emerge out onto the streets, that it comes back in some way again. But, remember this virus, it's not a living organism. If we stop human-to-human transmission, it will actually die out. And I think all the examples around the world are that rigorous testing has been what has led to success. And we are still, I'm afraid, in a pretty woeful situation. Now, what are the economics? Today's a really big and very, very important day. We've seen the figures overnight that in the space of the last week, 500,000 people have gone onto the unemployment register, are applying for benefits. It's an absolutely stunning figure, although I suppose in some ways not wholly surprising. Now, so far, one of the big ideas that was rolled out by the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, was this loan guarantee scheme for businesses. Up to £300 billion would be available for businesses to borrow to get them through this difficult period. But I have to say that we're almost a couple of weeks into that, and there are several very real problems. The first is that it takes banks a very long time to process any of these applications. The second is, even though these are companies that want to borrow money, the banks have been insisting on personal guarantees from the directors of those companies. Now, whether that means that you'd be liable to lose your house or not is unclear, but they are still looking for personal guarantees. And I think in a situation like that, a lot of people are saying, well, maybe better we simply go bust and start again than take out loans on that basis. So it's slow to administer. It's very, very difficult when you're asking people for personal guarantees. The interest rates that are being charged by some of the banks for these loans are frankly a rip-off, given that interest rates are down hovering just above zero. And I have a feeling that actually, my own view, I could be wrong, but my own view is not much of that money is going to be taken up. And if it is, it will take a huge amount of time. Well done to RBS and NatWest, who this morning have said they will not be looking for personal director guarantees for these loans. But we've got a heck of a long way to go on all of this. And I worry it's not really going to work. And of course, so far, nothing has been done for the self-employed. Nothing has been done for those running small limited companies, for those acting as sole traders. But it's not just them, because there are lots of people out there on 0 hours contracts, lots of people out there without regular employment contracts, people who have seasonal work, whatever it is. Up to 11 million people don't earn regular salaries and then have not got the opportunity or the potential to be covered by the scheme, the furloughing scheme that the government has put in place. And this is where my real worry is. My real worry is that so many of these people are simply going to run out of money and run out of money at some point in April. And I'm concerned that if you have millions of people who literally have not got enough to live on. And okay, I know the statutory sick pay of £94 a week, but frankly, for a couple with a few kids, that does not give enough money to be able to live. And I'm worried what happens to social order if we have that number of people out there without any money. Now, personally, what I want to see Rishi Sunak do is the kind of thing that's happening in Ireland, the kind of thing that's being talked about in the USA. It's called helicopter money. I never thought, I've been advocate of something like this, but these circumstances are extreme. Helicopter money would mean you'd give every adult in the country £1,000 a month for the next 3 months. Pretty simple to administer. You just look at the electoral roll of those with national insurance numbers. It could easily be done. What would the cost of that be? Well, the cost of that would be, for 3 months, £120 billion. Yup, it's a big sum of money. But if it helps maintain the peace, if it helps keep social order, then I think it will be worth every single penny. Now, I don't think the Chancellor is going to do that this afternoon. I suspect there'll be some formula for the self-employed where they'll be paid some form of compensation according to what they've earned over the course of the last few years, up to a limit of, £25,000, £30,000 per annum. That'll be okay for those that have been self-employed for some years. For those that are set up in the last 2 or 3 years, I suspect they're going to be in very real trouble. And I'll return to this theme of social order. I'm not going to name the company because that might get me and them into trouble. But I have direct first-hand accounts of a department store in South London last Thursday evening where stealing from menswear and women's wear departments, stealing of clothes, was going on such a scale that people were literally getting armfuls of clothes and just marching out of the shop in numbers that the store detectives simply couldn't deal with. And it was so bad, the store was shut early and barricades put across the doors to those departments. This is what can happen. I said a couple of days ago that a crisis brings out the best in people, and gosh, don't those 500,000 people prove it, but it brings out the worst in people too. And the last thing I want to see are millions of desperate people out there who might start to break the law in all sorts of ways, and that would lead to the really bad people in society taking advantage. So I think today matters absolutely hugely, and all I can say to Chancellor Rishi Sunak is we are absolutely relying on you.
We will make America great again.